DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
To all of you who voted for GB News to win at the Trick Awards for the 3rd year in a row.
So thank you so much for voting for us.
First, and hopefully there'll be a few more to come down the line.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's because of you that we're proud to be the People's Channel. It's because of you that we are Britain's news channel.
Good evening. At 6 o'clock, I'm Miriam Cates, and you're watching GB News. Coming up in the next hour, Sir Keir Starmer capitulates to his backbench rebels, but with disability benefit costs soaring, can we afford an ever-expanding welfare state? Also today, the PM reveals he deeply regrets his Island of Strangers speech on mass migration. So are there any more U-turns to come? And the government floats the idea of a one-in, one-out asylum seeker plan to stop the boats. But is a new deal with France enough to tackle the Channel crossings? And an eye-opening report reveals the direct impact that mass migration is having on our housing crisis, with the number of arrivals since the year 2000 thought to be pushing rents up £132 extra each month across England, and even more in the capital. And number 10 is reportedly gagging civil servants after a warning stating that public sector officials cannot talk at open events where their comments have not been vetted in advance. So is this another blow to free speech under Labour? Well, we'll be debating whether civil servants should be allowed to speak in public. And my panel tonight, I have political consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. But first of all, here are your latest news headlines.
Very good evening from the newsroom. The top story at 6. Marcus Monzo has been jailed for life today for murdering 14-year-old schoolboy Daniel Andrin with a samurai sword. The judge called Daniel's injuries unsurvivable and blamed Monzo's prolonged drug use for his state of mind. The 37-year-old also injured 5 others, including 2 police officers, during a 20-minute rampage in April. He was found guilty of attempted murder, wounding with intent and carrying an offensive weapon. While speaking outside the Old Bailey earlier this afternoon, Daniel's father said his son had so much potential and was taken away in a way that no family should ever have to endure.
No verdict or sentence can bring back our son Daniel, who we loved so dearly, but we are grateful that justice has been served. Daniel was taken from us in a way that no family should ever have to endure. His life had so much potential ahead. He was gifted academically, was kind, and had a generous spirit that touched everyone who knew him. We carry that light with us, even in this dark time.
Donald Trump is celebrating what he has described as a giant win after the Supreme Court limited judges' power to block presidential orders. It paves the way for his controversial birthright citizenship ban to take effect in just 30 days. In a briefing lasting over an hour, Trump hailed the decision as a monumental victory for the Constitution and criticised radical left judges for undermining his powers. Here, Sir Keir Starmer has confirmed a major climb down on his welfare reforms, a third government U-turn in just a month. It's after a rebellion by more than 100 Labour MPs threatened to sink the bill. The move slashes up to £3 billion from the bill's expected savings, casting doubt over Rachel Reeves' economic plans. Some rebels have welcomed the concessions, but others say they'll still vote against the bill over fears of a two-tier welfare system. 4 people have been arrested today by counter-terror police after a break-in at RAF Brize Norton, where military planes were sprayed with red paint. Footage posted by pro-Palestinian group Palestine Action showed activists targeting an RAF jet engine using scooter and fire extinguishers. 3 suspects, aged 24, 29 and 36, were arrested under the Terrorism Act, with a 4th woman held for assisting an offender. The government now plans to prescribe Palestine Action, making support for the group illegal. Defence Secretary John Healey has also ordered a full review of UK-based security after what he described a deeply disturbing breach. France has agreed to take back some Channel migrants in a new one-in, one-out deal with the UK. For every illegal migrant arriving here, one will be returned across the Channel. It's the first agreement of its kind aimed at stopping repeat crossings and cracking down on smuggling gangs. The Home Secretary is expected to unveil the plan next week ahead of President Macron's state visit to London. The critics, including Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden, say, well, it's too little, too late.
It's going to actually increase the number of people crossing the Channel, and it's going to be sort of weird merry-go-round in the middle of the English Channel as we have people coming on one side and then shifting them back just for others to come on the reverse again. It's completely ridiculous. What we should have is a proper deterrent, like we had with the Rwanda scheme, which said if you come here illegally, you do not get to stay in the UK.
Well, there is one reason why I saw our very own Miriam Cates running into the studio in a sweat. Yes, amber heat health alerts are now in force across much of England as the country faces its second heat wave of the summer so far. Temperatures are set to soar into the 30s this weekend, peaking on Monday when Wimbledon opens, and highs of even 35 are possible in London and Cambridgeshire. That could make it the hottest start to the tournament on record. And festival goers at Glastonbury can expect dry skies, sunshine and potentially tropical nights as the heat wave rolls into next week. Nothing makeup can't cover, don't worry, Miriam. Those are the latest headlines. I'll see you very soon.
Well, thank you to the rude but honest Sam Francis. It is true, has been a hot day. I've in fact been at Sports Day all day and I have caught the sun, rather. I think I'm going to be pink tomorrow. Anyway, Sam, I'll get you back later. Well, welcome to Judes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and I've got my panel with me until 7, political consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. And as always, please do get your views in at gbnews.com/your say, and we'll be reading out your views and opinions throughout the show. Well, on to our first story, and the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has capitulated to a major backbench rebellion today as he announced that the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill will be watered down, with existing disability benefits claimants keeping their payments. Here's the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, speaking today.
I really believe these are positive changes. We've worked hard to get agreement on this. There's really, really strong commitment to the principles of reforming our welfare state. Those who can work should get help, and we have the biggest ever investment into employment support for sick and disabled people, but also to protect those who can never work, make sure their incomes are protected and make sure they're never reassessed again.
Now, Number 10 has refused to rule out tax rises to pay for this U-turn, as a think tank estimates that the changes to avoid a revolt could cost £3 billion. But with welfare costs soaring, how can we afford an ever-expanding welfare state? And Alex, that is what we have, isn't it? And this was a minor attempt, really, to cut costs, but now there is no hope of cutting costs.
Well, you're right on the principle, but let's consider what it means for the government. I mean, it might just save them time if they made these U-turns in real time. The Prime Minister could begin a speech announcing a policy, then at the midpoint in the speech he could say that the policy is under review, and by the end he could say, I can confirm that it now won't be be introduced. And it would just cut through all of this embarrassment that they have to go through in the Commons being threatened by their colleagues. The problem for him is no matter what the reform is, once you've demonstrated that you can be beaten like this, it will happen again and again. I'm not making a party political point. My God, it happened to the Conservatives enough. But once you've shown that your backbench can push you around, they don't just go home. They don't say, oh, that's OK, then that's one and done. They would do... I mean, it's remarkable to me that we're saying this, given the size of the majority that the Labour Party just secured. But if you look in hindsight, I think we can see peak Starmer in the rearview mirror.
What do you think, Matthew? Because I think Alex has got a point, but I think it's more to do with the actual issue, the actual policy here, which is that it's to do with welfare spending. And, you know, there was unrest over Chagos, there was unrest over other things, but the Prime Minister didn't back down. But because welfare has become like a ratchet and it only goes one way, the PM has found out to his cost that Labour backbenchers just won't vote for any cuts.
I think also Labour backbenchers are going to think of their own jobs. I saw data in the week that was shared with me that 80 MPs have majority smaller than the amount of PIP claimants in their constituency. If you were to extrapolate that data and potentially say that 2 people in those people's lives were to be swung the other way against Labour because it had impacted somebody they knew, you're looking at losing 280 seats at the next election on this alone. I think most people would say that the welfare bill is bloated. I think where Streeton alluded to it and got sort of slapped down, I think there is a potential element of overdiagnosis and COVID will have had an impact in that. I think COVID has really messed people up and we forget about that a little bit. But there's an element of... there's a lack of resilience sometimes and people will shoot me down for that. I speak as someone that struggles himself with mental health and has done for the last 15 years. The difference with this is we're seeing a rise of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And I think some mental health issues can be temporary compared to physical ailments, and that's where we've maybe got...
The majority of the increase of people being signed off for life still. It's not just saying... That's the problem. The one person in the government that seems to be making sense to me is Streeting. And as you rightly say, he's been shut out of the debate now. I thought he was on the money when he said people are being... there's a level of overdiagnosis. But look at the trouble the government's got itself into. They think... I think they thought that the reversal on winter fuel allowance would buy them credit with their left, that the reversal would mean they'd be more on side. That's not how it works. If you concede, it invites further concessions. And look at Liz Kendall and the clip that you just shown us. She's out there announcing a completely different policy, as if nothing has changed, everything is going to plan.
And that's a really important political point, and you're right, the Conservatives did exactly the same. But the economic point is that there are no cuts that Labour will vote for. The backbenchers didn't want the winter fuel allowance. That would have saved just £1.5 billion. They don't want these relatively minor cuts to disability benefit payments, which are soaring. And by the way, we're the only country in the world that treats mental health the same as physical health when it comes to benefits. They're not going to vote to scrap the triple lock. So it is inevitable that the welfare bill is going to go up and up and up. What are we going to do about this?
Well, what the party could have done, which I think would have got more broad-based support, I think someone on the left would have still found it uncomfortable and felt like it was punching down. £5 billion, which is the amount that would have been saved under the initial plans the government put forward, is there or thereabouts the same amount that we lose each year in benefit fraud. If you were to go, we're going to invest in DWP officers who are going to go out and find these people and get this money back, I think Joe Public would have been more supportive, as well as your potential backbenchers, than going after people who can't dress themselves.
But it isn't just that, though, is it?
No,
it's the fact that mental health...
That's the point.
We've got a chart that hopefully we can show on the screen about the approval rate for sickness benefits and how that has changed over the years. And you see that from 2020, it's on the screen now, from 2020, when PIP assessments were allowed to be done online and over the phone rather than face-to-face because of COVID, guess what happens? The approval rate goes up. Just reverse that.
Because we completely agree on the point, I'm going to have one more go at saying to you, you think we're having different debates. You think I'm making a political point and you're talking about the substance. We're having the same debate because the government has shown today it's no longer able, if it ever was, to change the substance on this anymore. It's lost control of the agenda such that whatever the topic is, it will no longer be able to intervene intervene. So my answer to your question about what's going to happen is we will not have meaningful change until we have a change of government. But I know this sounds very early in a parliament with a huge majority to be saying this.
No, I agree.
But they've demonstrated they cannot control their own backbenches. They cannot control their agenda in parliament. And this government will not be able to realise meaningful change. That, I'm afraid, is the answer.
So what kind of cuts would Labour backbenchers vote for? Because if we carry on like this, pensioner spending is going to go from 15% of GDP to 21% of GDP in just 4 or 5 years. I mean, this wipes out any potential to spend more on defence or infrastructure.
I don't know what cuts they would accept. I think part of the problem was I think both main parties were dishonest in their manifestos, in that both parties said there would be no tax rises or cuts to public spending. One was going to have to give no matter who got it, and it would have been the same if it was the Conservatives. So I think they're just feeling they've been punching bags, right, because they've been marched up and down hills on different policies, and then there's been U-turns because of either media pressure, opposition pressure, backbench pressure. And I think they've had enough. The concern, as Alex has said, I don't think there will be potentially any meaningful change on lots of things. I saw a journalist who's very plugged into Labour politics say they've now smelt blood on this and gone, well, we're not giving in on immigration, we're not giving in on all this stuff. But it's partly a party management issue. This is what happens when you ignore MPs and treat them like dirt. We've had people in the background of Labour going around going, you owe me your job. I got you selected. I blocked candidates. People are going to take umbrage with that and go, why am I going to do what you
I'm sure that's true,
no.
but is it also the case that MPs are just not willing to do anything unpopular, even if it's in the national interest?
I tell you what could have made this a lot closer in the national interest. 120 rebels. The Conservative parties could have said, we'll back you. The Conservative Party could have said, you're really going to reform welfare? You can get it through on Tory votes. Makes it harder for the government to explain it to their left.
But
and
if they really cared about the national interest,
it might actually deliver change.
True.
Well, we'll have to leave that discussion there, but don't go away, because coming up, and speaking of U-turns, the Prime Minister made another one today, as he said that he deeply regrets his Island of Strangers speech. Well, more on that shortly.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain. We like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Back in 2015, Thornton and Cleveley's resident Emma Shepherd noticed the grass in her garden wasn't growing. Within months, she had to put down Alfie, one of her beloved dogs who had developed throat cancer. Just weeks later, she developed a lesion on her back, which would later be diagnosed as skin cancer. She knew then that something wasn't right.
I wasn't really aware of the history of the ICI site when I took the property. I did so much investigation. I had the ground tested with my own money. There was high levels of metals in there and some obviously cancerous carcinogenics in there. They actually nicknamed me Erin Brockovich because I was so all over it.
Last year, a joint investigation was launched by the Environment Agency and the local council. That was following the discovery of PFOA, a man-made chemical that potentially causes cancer. Both parties told GB News they are now working together on this matter, whilst the company under investigation for the potential release of the substance had this to say. AGC Chemicals Europe sets the highest standards for itself and takes its commitments to the local community and to the environment extremely seriously. They added that they voluntarily phased out the use of PFOA in the UK by early 2012. Release of the substance was within the permits held by AGC Chemicals Europe at the time, and also UK legislation in place at the time. And yet, 2 months ago, residents within a kilometre of the site received this letter from the council, advising them not to consume anything grown in their gardens due to potential PFOA contamination.
GB News, the People's Channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got my panel, political consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. Now, sticking with the theme of U-turns, there was another one today for the Prime Minister because Sir Keir Starmer says that he deeply regrets his Island of Strangers speech, with critics going so far as to compare it to Enoch Powell's infamous Rivers of Blood speech in the 1960s. Let's remind ourselves of what the Prime Minister said back in May.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower-paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth. You're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo.
Well, in a candid interview with The Observer, the Prime Minister told the interviewer that he and his speechwriters had no idea that his words could be interpreted as an echo of Powell's speech. So is this another U-turn, and how will it fare for the government? Matthew, this is a bit embarrassing because he didn't just say that he wasn't aware of the reference or the comparison to Powell. He also said that he hadn't really read the speech properly first, and that's why he wasn't thinking about the connotations. Which is worse, to stick with something unpopular or to admit you weren't prepared?
Stick with something unpopular for the time. I wouldn't say this is embarrassing. This is insane. This is genuinely insane. This is the sort of thing you may confess in a memoir after a decade in government or something and go, do you know, to this day I still think I shouldn't have said that. But you don't say it. You haven't been in government 12 months and you're going, I don't read my speeches. And admittedly, listen, he's a human being. His house has been set on fire. He's, you know, this is a very uncomfortable thing to then have to come in and try and deal with. But there's a whole layer of this that is bizarre. Why are you talking to your mate who is a journalist that's writing this up? How have you not got the political foresight to go, this might be a bad thing to sort of say? Do you know, I'm a bit lost for words at how bizarre and ridiculous this is. I think that it should be welcomed by, and it has been, I think, by lots of Labour MPs who've gone, oh, good. And I can't blame, you know, his team are a little bit older than me, I think, but I didn't know about the reference, truth be told. I think maybe you need an older, experienced political head that may know this sort of stuff, more of the trivia. The line itself, I think, could have been used as an opening speech as soon as we won the election. I think rather than it just being solely against immigration and being seen as maybe a bit nasty, you could talk about how we're all seemingly living online. There's a lack of community in lots of areas now. You ring the police when your phone's been nicked and they don't turn up, and we want to fix Britain before we become an island. I think that would have been a much better, broader look at the country. Rather than the way it was used.
Now, Alex is probably just signalling to those on the left, especially after a difficult week, but for those of us on the right who are concerned about immigration, this speech in May was the first time where some of us thought, actually, Sir Keir Starmer understands what's wrong, and now he's saying he was wrong to say it.
Well, that's why I want to disagree with the question you put to Matthew. I don't think this was unpopular. I think it was very popular. And I think that it was the first time many of us thought, we've got this Prime Minister actually understands. He actually gets how people feel about it. So, of course, he changed his mind and reversed course. It was a vibrant phrase that spoke to a deeper social truth. Now, you've demonstrated other ways in which it can be a deeper social truth. But even on the migration topic, it was one that would have meant many people, most especially, you might think, white working-class voters that Labour needs to win back, might have thought, he gets it. You know, I may not have even voted for him, I may have loaned my vote to Reform, but he actually understands it. So, of course, this anodyne Prime Minister has resiled from his own terms when, for once, he used a glowing phrase that worked. But I suppose if you're going to appease your left, you might as well go the whole hog and do it twice in a day, rather than you know, leaving it all half-baked.
But this is what's so disappointing about it, because he did put his his finger on something, which is that there is this kind of social unrest, social fear about the level of economic level of immigration. But there's also been an economic consequence as well. And Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick called attention to that today, raising a study that was published this morning about the impact of mass migration on housing. Here's Robert Jenrick.
If you live here in London, you're paying an estimated £216 in rent every single month due to the demand from immigration since 2001. That's £2.5 grand every year. Across England, you're paying £132 extra every month. This is according to first-of-its-kind research from Onward, which has shown the link between mass migration and our housing crisis.
So that was Robert Jenrick there, referring to the enormous amount of immigration that we have had since 2001. 6.9 million additional people have come to the UK since then. And the think tank Onward's experimental model assumes that 5.8 million of those people settled in England. Of course, net migration peaked at 906,000 per year in June 2023 at the height of the so-called Boris wave. And with too few houses being built per year and England consistently falling short of house-building targets, is mass migration making our young people poorer? And Alex, this report modelled, of course, it's impossible to know exactly what would have happened had we not had such high levels of migration. But according to this report, rents are on average £134 a month higher in England, £216 a month higher in London, just because of migration. It's really exacerbating our housing crisis, isn't it?
Supply and demand are basic principles that seem reflected in this excellent report from Onward. But it's actually quite a challenging environment for the Conservative Party. Robert Jenrick, who no doubt is the best media performer the Tory party's got at the moment, is still in a tricky spot on this because it invites the inevitable question, what did you lot do in 14 years? But he is, at least early in this Parliament, very eventful Parliament, laying out the groundwork for the Conservative Party taking a robust position on this. Because let's be honest, this is territory that's been owned by Nigel Farage for some time. It's Farage who's been saying on Question Time and so forth, there's a reason that you can't get a GP's appointment, there's a reason that your rent's gone up, there's a reason you can't find somewhere to rent. And the Conservative Party's rhetoric on it, not least because they were in government, has been far more muted. It's very interesting that this is being positioned by Robert Jenrick. I think he's right to do it, but it's very difficult for anyone who served in senior roles in government to adopt that kind of position.
I mean, as Alex says, this is kind of obvious, but nevertheless, it's very useful to be able to put a figure on the economic costs of mass immigration. And do you think this report will wake up some of those on the left who think that concerns about immigration are just social or even just prejudice?
I don't know. I think it's a talking point, but I have issues with the report. As you outlined, it's an experimental model and has multiple presumptions, so there's a pinch of salt that has to be taken there. It compares actual rents with a scenario of net zero migration at pinch points like 2001, 2014, 2021. So again, factors like income growth, fertility, all this sort of other stuff aren't played into case. There's also an assumption of proportional distribution when migrants come to this country, which also isn't the case. And Savills did a similar thing in 2021 with London councils, and what they found post-2021 is the reason of the increase in rents is because of the amount of landlords that have sold off property because they can't afford it. COVID has whacked them out of their businesses and whatever else, and they've needed the money. What it is, I think Alex said it himself, we haven't built enough houses. Everyone knows this. And I think I had a little look at the figures before. If you had zero migration, net zero migration since 2010, I thought, well, let's do it when the Tories came in. Labour had let a load of people in as well. But let's just pick a figure. I think Onward alluded to 2010 at some point in the report. Even if that was the case and we had no migration, we would still be 1.3 million homes short. That's a stain on all parties' houses.
That is why we need to build more homes. But the tragedy of it is very few people are willing to stand for office and say so. I was a candidate at the last election and made it a central plank of my campaign, say we should build more homes. And I'm afraid I felt pretty lonely in that
Do you
position.
think, just as we've talked about how the welfare state is Labour's Achilles heel in terms of they will never vote for cuts. Do you think that planning reform is the Tories' Achilles heel?
I don't, because you've got to convince people that a capitalist free market society works for them, and it's very difficult to convince people that the property-owning society works for them if they can't own any property. And we're at the position at the moment where the average ownership of homes is going up faster than people are ageing, right? It's going up so fast that if you're 18 today, the stats would suggest you're odds-on never likely to own your home. You've got to give people more hope than that, and it's a deeply conservative, in my view, small c and large c principle to believe that people can get on the housing ladder. After all, it empowers them in all manner of ways. If we've got society right or wrong, it's still the case that, no pun intended, a cornerstone of life in British society is owning your own property.
Matthew, do you think it is only about supply? I mean, clearly there have been serious constraints on supply in this country and lots of immigration. But even countries that have far more houses per capita and where far more people own second homes have seen extraordinary rises in purchase prices and rents, probably because interest rates have been so low for so long that people have been able to borrow more and therefore the price has gone up. It's not just supply, is it?
No, it isn't. I think it's all manner of things. I mean, the fact that my generation, you've got to find 7 to 8 times worth of your salary or whatever to try and put a deposit forward. It's the one thing that irks me, the stat that irks me, is we have more land in this country used for golf courses than we do housing. And that is
honestly true?
Yeah. Financial Times.
That is absolutely
Goodness.
1.1% of this country is built on for housing.
No, it's not against golf. It's that we don't have enough houses.
No, I'm not against. I mean, I build all over them. I'm rubbish at golf. But 1.1% of this country is built on for housing specifically. 2.2% is used for golf courses, and that's where I think we've totally got our priorities wrong. And I think Alex is right. I think also from an electoral point of view, if the Tories want to start appealing to younger voters, you're going to have not just people that are 18, people in my age, 30s, 40s, who are struggling, living at home with elderly parents because they can't get on in life and buy that home that they've always wanted.
There is a role on both sides of politics for a YIMBY campaign. Yes, in my backyard. When I lived in Elephant and Castle and I received a consultation saying a tower block's going to go up, what do you think? I went on saying, chose to live in Zone 1, right? You know, this is the nature of Zone 1. I approve. Once you've clicked approve, you can see the responses. I was the only one, right? Because everyone else who bothers to respond to that, like 200 people, were all like, no, 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 no.
Do you know the worst bit about that? Elephant Castle's had a huge regeneration last few years. Where do the people living in these new tower blocks think they came from all of a sudden? It's shut the front door.
But do you think there's a problem with the type of homes that are being built? I mean, there are too many flats, not enough houses.
It's a mentality.
But have you looked? We've recently moved house and we looked around a number of houses, and I have to say the new builds were so utterly awful, overpriced, tiny rooms, poor quality.
The Create Streets campaign has shown that you can build attractively within the... People blame the law in the UK, and there are some bad things about window heights and stuff like that. But Create Streets have shown you can build attractively, you can build on brownfield, and you can make it work economically. It's ambition and vision that's required. But in the end, there's this British instinct at the moment to oppose everything. The dream of some people is to buy the first house in a development and then oppose the rest being finished. It's just perverse, some people not wanting anyone to have a home. And when you start talking to them, what, do you want your kids to have a home? Yes. Well, do you want other people's kids to have a home?
It radicalises you to the point, especially at my age. I think, should we just get rid of judicial reviews? We need to stop opposing everything that isn't going to benefit
Well, Labour
ourselves.
have planned something along those lines, certainly to minimise the number of environmental complaints that can be made.
We've got to do something about it, because otherwise we're living on top of one another. As I say, you're living with elderly parents, and the only way you're getting on in life is if you've got the bank of mum and dad, which is most people's deposits, I imagine, certainly that I know, and they're fortunate enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. People work hard and pass down to the next generation, that's great. Or you're fortunate enough to already be wealthy and you've not got to worry about that sort of thing. But it's that... Was it Theresa May that used to talk about just managing the middle-of-the-road types that are working? I think of my mum and dad. My mum was a cleaner, dad was a postie. They got a mortgage in the 90s. That was... I can't imagine it was dead easy, but you try and be a postman now and get a mortgage or a cleaner, you've got absolutely
it's about 8 times the affordability of the
Exactly.
Absolutely
No way. No way at all.
Alex, if Reform win the next election, which they are by many... don't grimace. By many polls on course to do...
Are they going to be a political party by the next election? I honestly don't know.
Well, let's take politics changes very quickly. I will agree to that. Think of where we were 5 years ago. But if Reform were to win the next election and they have a manifesto of house building, etc., are they going to run into exactly the same trouble, which is they've got 350, 400 backbenchers, all of whom have constituencies, all of whom have people people complaining about housing developments and the costs of that and the impact on their communities, and suddenly they also decide that they can't individually vote for planning reform or welfare cuts for the sake of, while we mention it.
I, of course, wanted the Conservative Party to win the last election, and I was a candidate in it to that end. But when we got a different government, my profound hope was that this was one of the things that might be addressed. Labour said that they would reverse the presumption of permissioning at local government level, that they would build more houses. Their target looks suspiciously similar to the target we've had every single year in this country for the last 2 decades. So my hope now, and people may say I'm naive, whatever colour the next government is, my profound hope is that somebody grasps this by the nettle. And if it is reform or if it's a change of government, that next government has got to get elected on a manifesto commitment, a clear promise to build more homes, because then they can say to that backbenchers, this is the manifesto on which you were elected. The big trouble for us is we've got lots of history in this country, in all political parties, of people then resiling from the manifesto on which they stood the day they're elected.
Well, thank you for that, Alex. And we've got a few your says coming in. Going back to the welfare U-turn that we're talking about in the first section, Nick says, if, as Prime Minister, you keep doing U-turns and reviews on your policies and decisions, then you're showing that your leadership is out of control. And Alex, I don't think this was you, unless you've been...
In real time.
You're saying, when you're not on camera. That's quite impressive multitasking there. Alex says, Keir Starmer's Island of Strangers speech was astounding. He spoke the truth for once. Yes, I think a lot of people feel like that. Well, don't go anywhere, and please do keep sending in your views. But coming up, what do you think of the idea of a one-in, one-out migrant plan to stop the boats? That's up next.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Temperatures are likely to be 5 to 10 degrees above the average for June across parts of France and Spain. Very hot conditions persisting here. A bit of a breeze, but also temperatures above average in the Canaries, getting over 30 degrees for the next few days. Highs over 32 across Italy. Plenty of hot and sunny weather here. A few showers across mainland parts of Greece, but most of the Greek islands have turned a little bit cooler with some pleasant sunshine here and plenty more sunshine to come around the Mediterranean into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the weekend we'll see some pretty warm conditions, particularly so across the south and east of England. Humid nights and high temperatures by day. It's not going to be hot and sunny everywhere, however. There will be cloud and rain at times across the north from these weather fronts. They've been bringing pretty wet conditions across the Highlands today. This zone of rain slowly trickling southwards. Most of the rain overnight will be over hills and around coasts in the west. Many central and eastern parts will stay dry. Still quite breezy out there as well, and it is going to be a pretty warm night with temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens. Overall, a pretty grey start then to Saturday, but the rain will be clearing away to the south, so the Highlands in particular having a drier, brighter day. Further south, we'll start off with a lot of cloud. We should start with some sunny spells over the east, but quite grey and murky for southwest England and Wales, particularly around coast. And again, some drizzly rain over the hills. Maybe a bit of a damp start for Belfast and Edinburgh, but that rain is edging away to the south, and much of northern Scotland having a far brighter day tomorrow. Still quite blustery. In fact, if anything, the wind's strengthening further over the far northwest, where there will be 1 or 2 showers. But through the central belt of Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, that rain should edge to the south. So some sunny spells coming through. I suspect Cumbria may well stay dull with rain and drizzle, especially over the hills and mountains here on and off through the day. But for many places, it'll brighten up, and certainly over the Midlands, East Wales and Eastern England, those temperatures jumping up, getting into the high 20s, low 30s is possible. Sunday, similar temperatures across the east, a very warm, humid start. Again, a lot of cloud for Cumbria, some drizzly rain here in the Isle of Man, and maybe some drizzle at times for Northern Ireland. So cloudier skies here. Generally fine for Scotland, but with increasing cloud, with increasing sunshine in the south, more humidity, temperatures again getting up to 30 degrees. Hotter still across the southeast, in particular on Monday.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M65 eastbound in Lancashire, an overturned vehicle between junctions 8 and 10 causes 30-minute delays. In Staffordshire, the A50 eastbound between the A522 and junction A518 Uttoxeter East has 20-minute congestion. Meanwhile, in Buckinghamshire, the M25 clockwise entry slip at junction 16 has one lane closed due to a collision. In Kent, the M25 anti-clockwise between junctions 3 and 2 is congested with 30-minute delays. And on the trains, both Avanti West Coast and London North Western Railway face major disruptions between London Euston and Milton Keynes Central. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co. with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got political consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbit. Now, France is in negotiations with the UK to take back some Channel migrants under a one-in, one-out deal set to be unveiled this week. Now, would this look like a person being deported from the UK is going to be exchanged for another individual sent from France who has a right to be in Britain? Well, I'm about to go on holiday in France. Do you think I'll get back, or will I have to wait for somebody to leave? What do you think, Matthew?
I think it's tinkering. I don't think it'll stop the boats. You're still sort of saying, you can come here. You might get in, you might not. We'll have to wait and see. Depends how tenuous your link to the UK is and how that's going to be judged, and what if somebody's got a similar link to the other who misses out? And there's definitely all manner of ways this could go wrong. But I think it's tinkering, and the reason being it won't stop the boats. That's where I think most people in this country's anger comes from. It's the switching on the telly. It's going, this isn't fair. People are getting healthcare. People are getting doctors. They're getting put up. I'm struggling. I'm going out working all hours God sends. We have delivery people that are delivery companies that are totally happy knowing that illegal immigrants are buying profiles online to pretend to be people to work and whatnot and aren't being punished.
Let's come back to the consequences in a minute. Let's just stick with this, the discussions about the deal, because, Alex, as I understand it, the idea is that if people come across illegally on small boats, they would be deported back to France straight away. But to reward France for taking those people back, we would accept a set number, I think it's been floated, 20,000 asylum seekers a year of their choice that have connection with Britain.
Up to 20,000.
Up to 20,000.
So I agree with Matthew about the reasons for the outrage, and I share that, but I think I disagree with you. I think I'm a bit more positive on the policy. And the reason I'm more... look, I don't have the knee-jerk reaction. I thought Rwanda was a good policy. But what people tend to forget is that when Rwanda looked like it might happen, we saw that these networks are very sensitive to news headlines and very sensitive to what's going on. And people were saying in Calais, we might get sent back to Rwanda. It might get sent to Rwanda. I'm not sure I fancy the UK anymore. If the message comes out that you might very swiftly be turned back because a genuine asylum seeker is going to come to the United Kingdom, genuine refugee who's come through suffering, has been vetted by some international organisation, if their case is legitimate, if the message goes through those criminal networks that you're not going to succeed, then the young men who are overwhelmingly making up the people coming on these boats will say, well, let's try elsewhere then. Fair enough, let's go somewhere else. And the reason I think that's worth stressing is the United Kingdom is a generous and tolerant country. And if someone is in genuine need, it has suffered real persecution, if someone's come off a battlefield, if someone's had their home blighted by the raid of some appalling pillage, then the United Kingdom might well say, as long as it's not an overwhelming sort of town parked next to a village where it overwhelms the services, then we will say we welcome you and we'll do our best. It's the sheer size of these boats now coming and the numbers of people who, as I say, seem overwhelmingly to be young men. And I think it will have a profound deterrent effect if they think there's an international system in place, which means they'll get turned away and a genuine refugee comes instead. The trouble we'll have is the EU, as I understand it, will have a veto policy on this, has hitherto always disapproved of bilateral agreements between states. If they approve it, you might very swiftly see this kind of action going EU-wide. And I do think the, no pun intended, tide has turned in this policy area because it's affecting so many EU countries. They may well say yes, but they may say no.
The problem I see with this, Matthew, is that it could provide a deterrent if people are instantly taken back to France. But knowing the complexities of our human rights legal network, I find it very difficult to believe that that will actually happen. And the moment people step foot on this island, they will have some sort of claim in some sort of court, and so there won't be a deterrent.
And that's why I think there needs to be more radical action. I think there needs to be... If I was advising Keir, God forbid, if I was advising him, I think he should take leadership on this and call an extraordinary summit on the 1951 Convention of Asylum Seekers and Refugees, because we're at a point where people flee for many, many reasons, genuinely. The problem is we've also got people fleeing because they're going, my country is in a state. Loads of the world is. And we can only do our bit.
An economic migrant.
And as Alex has rightly pointed out, it is a Europe-wide issue, and that's why I think now is the time where you could get people around the table and say, I'm calling a summit, we have to meet around the table and talk about the definition of a refugee and what we do with regards to this convention and what we maybe set up going forward. And therefore, because at the moment, legally, the only way you can claim asylum in a country is to be there, which is causing these boat crossings. If you change it so that people are being processed at Calais, potentially, in British embassies, pinch points in Syria, Turkey, these sort of places where people may cross in the first place, and you have these agreements. It wouldn't be easy, don't get me wrong, it would not be easy whatsoever, but it's the only sort of radical change I can see where, one, you nullify the boats and therefore nullify reforms criticisms, but also you please your left base who are going, oh, it's a safe and legal route, people aren't dying, we like this sort of stuff, and that, for me, is the obvious one. If not, you're going to get yourself in a bind where the ECHR removal is going to be sold as a magic bullet like Brexit was.
Well, don't go anywhere, and please do get your views in, because coming up, number 10 is reportedly gagging civil servants after a warning stating that public sector officials cannot talk at open events where their comments have not been vetted in advance. Is this another blow to free speech under Labour? That's next.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Miriam Cates. And in fact, we're now in the Jubes Tavern because it is Friday night. So enjoy your weekend. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock, hopefully not drinking their beer too quickly, I've got political consultant Alex Dean.
I mustn't drink this thimble too quickly that you've given me. Up with this, I will not put. This is outrageous.
Well, we need you coherent, Alex, for the next 15 minutes at least. Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. Now, what is the role of a civil servant? Well, some of you may remember Sir Humphrey from the classic sitcom Yes Minister, who's here to enlighten us.
Makes me feel rather downcast. If it's our job to carry out government policies, shouldn't we believe in them?
What an extraordinary idea.
Why?
Bernard, I have served 11 governments in the past 30 years. If I'd lead in all their policies, I would have been passionately committed to keeping out of the common market and passionately committed to going into it. I would have been utterly convinced of the rightness of nationalising steel and of denationalising it and renationalising it. In capital punishment, I'd have been a fervent retentionist and an ardent abolitionist. I would have been a Keynesian and a Friedmanite, a grammar school preserver and destroyer, a nationalisation freak and a privatisation maniac, but above all, I would have been a stark-staring, raving schizophrenic.
Fantastic series. Well, Sir Humphrey and Bernard may have been the archetypal public officials, but it has been reported that Number 10 is going to gag civil servants from speaking at public events without their comments being vetted in advance. Civil servants have also been banned from taking part in question and answer sessions, and some people are saying that this is another chilling attack on free speech from Labour. Alex, what do you think? Civil servants shouldn't be talking about their opinions in public, should they?
No, but the thing is, this is actually quite important because you can't say what's going to come up in advance in Q&A. So this is effectively saying, no matter how vetted the comments are, you can't participate in those kinds of forums. And it's actually very important that somebody who's going to implement a policy can discuss with industry or the bodies concerned, the people who are going to be regulated, how things are going to work. And it happens all the time. This is the reason that actually really matters. So civil servants might take part in, the example here was RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, but it might be the case in house building of the debate we were just having, or education, or healthcare. Somebody might go to a trust forum who's going to disclose how the next policy is going to play out. This happens all the time and I confess an interest because I work in that sort of industry where civil servants have a role. And the long-standing policy is that civil servants shouldn't express their view on policy, nor should they announce policy, but they can explain what policy is, and that is extremely useful. And if you pull that back, it's a material diminution in the benefit in the public arena of discussion. And perversely, what it does is it renders those conversations private. It renders them less scrutinisable. It renders them less open to the public, who are entitled to know how something is going to be implemented. It won't stop the conversation between industry and civil service. It'll just make it happen behind closed doors. And for me, that's completely wrong.
Matthew, it does seem quite a bizarre restriction because civil servants have to appear before select committees in Parliament all the time, and they have to answer whatever question MPs throw at them, and sometimes they have to answer for the minister if the minister is not on top of the detail. So why allow them to speak in Parliament but not at public events?
I suppose it's easier to mop up a minister's silly comment than it is, to go on record with your own, potentially. I mean, Alex made some good points I'd not actually thought about. It will impact certain sectors, probably. I mean, would it be less scrutinised if you were to invite a group of people from said industry into the government department?
Yes, exactly. So if a set of selected individuals, cherry-picked by the department, go to the department to discuss things, let's take an example. Defence procurement is complicated and run by the civil service. You can host, and very much in the public interest to have some transparency in that, but the rules and regulations change all the time. So having a panel event in which the civil service who's going to implement it can discuss what that's going to look like. They're not announcing policy, they're not making it or giving their own opinions, but they can explain in a public forum how the next round of our defence, our money, is going to play out over the next 2-3 years. Instead, now they can only do so to the the selected individuals who come to the department and get their vetted briefing privately. To me, that's completely wrong. That's not what the Labour Party was elected to do. Nothing about this in the manifesto. No sense on the left of that being a principle of socialism. To me, that just seems like something that government does to protect its own reputation.
No, it screams, therefore, of, you know, a paranoid and insular-looking control freakery element of government.
You said it, not me.
Seeing as neither of you two are going to stick up for the government, I'm not sure what I think about this, but I can see the point, which is that the civil service has become more politicised. I think that's undeniable. Certainly the last government found it quite difficult to get certain things through because of the views of civil service.
If that's what the civil servant's going to do, you don't say it publicly, you just knife the minister and undermine them in role.
Well,
right?
Alistair Humphrey, but the thing is, now that everything is filmed, everything is recorded, it is quite easy to say things in a way that indicate very clearly what you think.
The civil servant who shoots his or her mouth off and goes off script and announces their own views will very quickly find themselves on the receiving end of the appropriate disciplinary process. That doesn't mean that you should stop civil service discussion in civil society. It's contrary to any proper conversation between the public and government that you introduce a policy like this.
Matthew, do you think the civil service is fit for purpose? We look back at Yes Minister, and it was a wonderful comedy, but nevertheless did highlight how easy it is for civil servants to frustrate the will of government if they want to, whether that's for political reasons, whether things are just too difficult. And I know for a fact that that did happen under the last Conservative government. I imagine it's happening under the Labour government. Do you think the civil service does need reform?
It's a tricky one. I know lots of very good people who are very good civil servants. I've no doubt their heart's in the right place. They've obviously got their own politics, but they believe in public service. It's a very good thing to do. I sat down a few weeks ago with the former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was in Number 10, and he outlined over a coffee the warped sort of way that Whitehall works. And I just left the whole meeting thinking, what, the whole thing is blowing up. Like, it doesn't seem to work and function in the way it should. It rewards failure. And therefore, no, reform is probably overdue.
Well, a cheery end to the programme, but at least it's sunny out there and it's the weekend. Join me again tomorrow at 10 o'clock for Saturday Morning Live with Charlie Peters. But for now, enjoy your Friday night. Thanks for watching, and here's the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the weekend will see some pretty warm conditions, particularly so across the south and east of England. Humid nights and high temperatures by day. It's not going to be hot and sunny everywhere, however. There will be cloud and rain at times across the north from these weather fronts. They've been bringing pretty wet conditions across the Highlands today. This zone of rain slowly trickling southwards. Most of the rain overnight will be over hills and around coasts in the west. Many central and eastern parts will stay dry. Still quite breezy out there as well, and it is going to be a pretty warm night with temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens. Overall, a pretty grey start then to Saturday, but the rain will be clearing away to the south, so the Highlands in particular having a drier, brighter day. Further south, we'll start off with a lot of cloud. We should start with some sunny spells over the east, but quite grey and murky for southwest England and Wales, particularly around coast. And again, some drizzly rain over the hills. Maybe a bit of a damp start for Belfast and Edinburgh, but that rain is edging away to the south, and much of northern Scotland having a far brighter day tomorrow. Still quite blustery. In fact, if anything, the wind's strengthening further over the far northwest, where there will be one or two showers. But through the central belt of Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, that rain should edge to the south. So some sunny spells coming through. I suspect Cumbria may well stay dull with rain and drizzle, especially over the hills and mountains here on and off through the day. But for many places, it'll brighten up, and certainly over the Midlands, East Wales and Eastern England, those temperatures jumping up, getting into the high 20s, low 30s is possible. Sunday, similar temperatures across the east, a very warm, humid start. Again, a lot of cloud for Cumbria, some drizzly rain here in the